Hey, everybody, welcome back to my show. I am Allison. If you're new, you can find me on Instagram at A Devotional Heart, where I post images and just things from my life, but also having to do with Orthodox Christianity, which I am currently learning about. I am a catechumen. And I started this channel to interview other Christians and particularly Orthodox Christians so that I could learn more about the faith. And today I have my first guest who's a member of Clergy. This is the first father priest that I have had on my show, and I've known about him for several months from his YouTube videos and just seeing him around the orthosphere. His name is Father Deacon Dr. Ananias, and he is the CEO and founder and president of Patristic Faith. Father is an Orthodox apologist and professor of philosophy at Fullerton College and Carroll College. He has a BA in liberal arts from Thomas Aquinas College, together with a master's of honors and PhD in philosophy in epistemology, philosophy of science, and philosophy of mind from University College Dublin. His current academic work focuses on philosophical theology, epistemology, and the philosophy of science. Father is the author of several articles and peer-reviewed papers, including Serial Materialism and the Mind-Body Problem, Gnostic Scientism and Technocratic Totalitarianism, An Orthodox Approach to the Dangers of Modernity and Technology, and An Orthodox Theory of Knowledge, the epistemological and apologetic methods of the Church Fathers. He is also known for his YouTube channel, The Norwegian News, where he provides content on theology, apologetics, logic, and philosophy. Welcome, Father. Thank you so much for being a guest on my show.
Thank you, Allison. It's an honor and pleasure to be here with you.
And today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, relativism. And we're also going to talk a little bit about philosophy and orthodoxy in general. But first, can you just give us a little bit of background, how you even decided you were going to be a priest, a professor? Just give us a little bit of a backstory.
Yeah, somebody was, one of my parishioners was asking me, we were all over for Thanksgiving, and a blessed Thanksgiving to all of you. I was over at my parishioner's house for Thanksgiving, and they'd asked me a similar situation. Or a similar question. Have you always known you would be clergy, and how did that come about? And the answer was no. Obviously, through my schooling, I wanted to do philosophy and became, the grace of God, a professor of philosophy, and have always enjoyed that. And from a young age, I was involved in apologetics, and I was introduced to Christian apologetics and philosophy roughly at the same time. I was brought up evangelical Christian. I went to Calvary Chapel High School, and my senior year Bible classes, they had brought somebody in to teach Christian apologetics and introduction to logic. And that was kind of the first time that I had been exposed to that. And it's such a wonderful point in time in my life, because I don't know if any of you have had this experience, but, around 16 to 18 years old, if you are religious yourself, as I began to question things. Well, how do we know that? And why is it that this person is correct on this? And I always kind of had an anti-authoritarian and skeptical kind of attitude, especially in my youth. And so that was kind of directed towards my religious upbringing too. And not because, I just wanted to do disruptive things, but I really deep down wanted to have answers, and good answers, for believing things. And I wasn't getting it. I was getting the don't ask, those kinds of questions. That's a lack of faith and a lot of kind of guilt trips, which was just making me more upset. I'm like, these people don't know what they're talking about. There's obviously an insecurity. If you don't have a good reason to believe something, like, well, I don't want to believe what you're telling me. I need good reasons. And sure enough, God brought somebody into my life who all these deep philosophical, theological questions that I thought I'd come up with. He had mentioned, oh, that's super easy, blah, 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 blah. It just rattled it away. It was the first time I actually heard cogent answers and defenses for the things that we believed in Christianity. I thought it was great. I was like, this is incredible. And especially because I really wasn't motivated to study anything because I have a motivational problem. It turns out that I have to like things and be interested in them to do anything. And so I just had no interest in school whatsoever because there was nothing that I really liked or saw could be a practical benefit to me in any way until this. And I started asking for more materials. Where can I go? This is fantastic. I mean, it really just kind of woke me up and motivated me. And I was directed to some Christian apologetic and philosophical groups that met in Orange County. And as a young 18-year-old kid, I started attending and soaking all of this stuff up. And that really became like a foundation for my apologetics and philosophical work going into the various higher academic institutes that you had mentioned in reading out my bio. And I fell in love with it, and I incorporated that into kind of my faith. I never saw kind of philosophy and the Christian faith as opposed, and was able to kind of work through those things. And yeah, that's kind of my background had no intention of being clergy. Even when I became Orthodox, I had no intention. And part of that was, we all have kind of idols that we construct, false narratives about ourselves, about who we are, about the world, and about other people. And I wasn't immune from this either. I had insecurities growing up of not being intelligent or having value and stuff like that. And so what human beings tend to do is overcompensate. And I constructed a kind of narrative of my insecurity where we'll all be valued if I'm an academic, if I'm a professor or something like that. And that was the identity. We talk about identity politics and stuff like this, that I am this, or I'm. Now, as Orthodox Christians, we know that all of it's nonsense, that our identity is in Jesus Christ. We're made in the image. All the other stuff is just distractions from that. And I, fell victim to the distractions where who I am is a professor of philosophy. I'm an academic. That's where all my worth and value. And there's a real kind of pride in that too. This is a more noble trait than any other. Philosophers are particularly, or maybe any professor, that's a particular temptation. Of course, I know more than everybody, and I'm, more valuable than everybody else. Why aren't they paying me more? So that was me. I constructed this kind of false idol of I'm the philosophy professor, I'm the academic. And so that's why I never considered kind of the clergy. I was asked by my priest, have you ever thought about, I don't think he asked me, how about, he mentioned, how about we make you clergy? Let's send you to seminary. Mm-hmm. And I said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. And I said that because first I knew what that meant. That's like going and sign up for the army, permanently. I'm like, your life's no longer yours. And what was most important to me at the time was my academic career, and that I needed the freedom to be able to move and do whatever I wanted to further that academic career. And I perceived at the time when that question was asked that being clergy would be an impediment to that. And so I rejected it. And the priest said, well, okay, just go pray about it. And came up to me about 3 months later and said, I was thinking about something. He's my spiritual father, by the way, too. He's a Romanian priest. And said, if God wants you to be clergy, there's very little you and I have to say about that, dude. And he had put it that way, and it hit me that way, that you're putting yourself first and your ideas about what's right in the world. And I just kind of at that moment introspected and realized, well, how great is my track record when I'm self-focused that way about what life's supposed to be and where I'm supposed to go. And I answered that question, I made a disaster of it. And it hasn't produced happiness, fulfillment. And it just hit me. And I realized, I kind of surrendered. I realized that I'm tired of doing things my way for myself. And I'm ready to become a servant forever. And that's especially the diaconate in the priesthood. They are the servants. They're the lowest authority level of the priesthood. And they serve. They serve the people, they serve the priest, they serve the bishop. And I was ready to do that. I was ready to change my life. And I accepted that and, went to seminary and was trained. And there was true fulfillment when I put the other first before myself. I always struggled with boredom growing up. And that's because nothing satisfies. It may provide a momentary enjoyment to things of life, whether that's jobs, academic stuff. I mean, usually the higher stuff like academic, and, it lasts longer than, just kind of banal physical pleasures and stuff like that. But it wasn't ultimately fulfilling, because insofar as that it's self-focused. And when I chose to become a servant and make my life no longer my own, but give to the people and to the church and to God, that was the first time in my life that I had no feelings of boredom or things not being right. I realized here I am in my true place, as we are created to be. Not as a professor, not as this person, not as a musician, not as an artist or whatever once, but as the image of Christ. And Christ came as the servant. Yeah. And so I've been fulfilled ever since. It's not an easy life. Very little pay, long hours, dealing with the world's problems, like but it's worth it. If you think about it, we put ourselves through, just if like you work out or something, there's all kinds of stuff, whether it's school or working out. We'll put ourselves purposely through uncomfortable things or even painful things, because what in the end, the goal that you're trying to achieve is worthwhile. And I think for clergy, it's the same. It's not all, happy, go lucky all the time. It's a hard life. It's a really difficult, but it doesn't matter, because the fulfillment of becoming the servant and serving the people in the church is all it's worth anything. And it's a type of martyrdom too.
Yeah. Can I go back? Can I ask you a question about your conversion? I'm always interested in what drew people to Orthodoxy, and how did you know that you wanted to become Orthodox?
Well, I just got my scientific calculator o matter 3000 out, and I just plugged in all the stuff and the answer just popped out, and I knew that. Let's see, I was probably first introduced to Orthodoxy around 1998, 99, around then. And again, this is right when I was starting to get into philosophy and apologetics. I was dissatisfied with my evangelical upbringing. At the time when I was in high school, I really didn't have kind of any tools or kind of a framework to kind of interpret the feelings. And therefore they just came kind of as intuitions and feelings, like something's off and something's wrong. And it made me upset and I didn't like it. And I really didn't know how to kind of interpret. I mean, it's already confusing enough when you're in high school trying to interpret your feelings. So you're going back and forth, like, is it me? Like, I guess I'm a bad person to know, I think these people are jokers. And so like, I don't know what they're doing or what they're up to, but like, it's not right. And I don't really know why, and so being exposed to philosophy and apologetics, I was starting to get given a toolbox in which I was being able to articulate this. And one of the early questions that I had, even before I was introduced to philosophy and apologetics and theology, was the kind of worship, the music and various things in an evangelical church. It bothered me. And I started asking questions, why? And was it the style of music? I'm like, I really don't like the music. And so I started asking questions. Can you do anything you want? I remember that in high school, that was the first question I started asking the pastors. Because and this will tie into our conversation about relativism, because relativism seeped into contemporary Western Christian culture, particularly evangelical Christianity, and kind of emphasizes like the feelings. Well, who are we to judge how anybody worships or prays or something like that? To each his own, as long as you know you're doing it your way. And those are kind of the answers that I got, that it doesn't really matter. It's the heart, right? It's so don't judge, and let's just have any kind of expression you want. And I remember asking, so wait a minute, you're telling me you could put a death metal band up there and start punching people out and mosh, like you would accept that? And they were like, well, no, that's a bit too far. I'm like, oh, really? Okay, now you have a standard. You're inconsistent because you're just telling me that anything goes, but there are things that are too far, right? And so if there was a standard, I'd like to, and I think we all admit that when we start kind of introspecting, that like, no, there is stuff that would be not acceptable and appropriate to worship of God. So it isn't relativism. Now I want to know if we all have this kind of intuition that there is a standard. I'd like to find it. I'd like to know who's correct. And that kind of started my journey. And when I was exposed to philosophy and theology and Christian apologetics, one of the questions that became really important to me is, what is church? Because again, this kind of relativism would come in. Hey man, I don't need a building. The church isn't a building. Like, church for me, bro, is like out on the wave, like just, getting the curl for Christ, right? And I was like
Like
really?
relationship. It's all about relationship, not religion. I hear that a lot.
Yes. And it was more this kind of like spirituality, not religion, rules. And that it was experientialism. So there's a couple different things historically that go into this kind of modern evangelical phenomenon. And that one is relativism. And the other one is kind of phenomenology and existentialism and these various things, that all that's important is what you experience, the kind of phenomenon. So if you're spiritually connected to God and nature, why isn't that church? And they got to set up this dichotomy that if you negate that, then you're a dogmatic, rule, pharisaical ceremonialist. Or you're open, your heart's open to God. And doesn't that sound nice? And just, we just all encourage everybody just to experience God wherever they can find him. If it's in Christ in the curl, on that shred in that wave, or in the mountains, or with your eye, people say like, my church is the Christian apologetics groups that we go to. I don't need to go to a preacher and this is where I connect to God. I heard that a lot from the age of like 18 to 21.
And a lot of these people that I hear this from are also sola scriptura, well, what does the Bible say? They always want to say, is that in the, are the icons in the Bible? Well, there is scriptural evidence for why we need to be in communion and in community and be part of the body of Christ as a church. But they don't look at those verses, I guess.
Or they have ideological pre-commitments that color what they read. Mm-hmm. To the point they may not even read certain or even knew that those verses, no matter how well they had memorized their Bible verses, because that, I don't know about you, but that's something I discovered when I came into Orthodoxy, that all of a sudden I started finding all these Bible verses that I was like, I never remember reading that.
No, I have no experience with Christianity. I went right from New Age for my whole life into Orthodoxy. I mean, there was like a 6-month window where I was a Christian, but I didn't know what Orthodoxy was. So now I'm a catechumen, but
praise God. So anyways, I started kind of delving into that question, and I remember, 18, 19, working out that there's obviously a difference between things that Christians do, Christian things, and church. And Christians fellowship together. They give almsgiving, right, to the poor. They pray to God when they're in nature and things, but none of those things seemed like church to me. Those are like parachurch, things that you Christians would do. Mm-hmm. And I started looking historically into it. The one common denominator was celebrating the Lord's Supper, the Eucharist. I'm like, that's always been present. Before I knew more about, kind of the history of the church and things like that, that immediately stood out to me, is that they were always partaking of communion. And that seemed to be something essential. So if that were true, then none of this stuff or whatever you decide is church. And then I started to realize that, that certain prayers in the service was historically founded, that had a historical foundation, that it was the people gathering together and praying. And scripture talks about this too. You know, when you said a lot of Protestants say, where is that in the scripture? And remember, in the scripture, it says they continued, I believe it's Acts, they continued in the prayers, not, they just were praying whatever willy-nilly kind of prayers that they wanted. There was obviously the prayers, very specific, a definite article there. And so I started to realize there was some type of liturgical form, and that it wasn't a free-for-all, and that you don't get to decide, you know, what music's going to sound or what kind of worship. And that eventually led me to considerations about the Eucharist itself, that I had a fundamental change. I prayed to God that if this is, because I was brought up thinking in kind of a Zwinglian kind of way, it's just a symbol. We just do this in memory of, and baptism was seen the same way too. It's just a sign. There's nothing really of God present in there. It's not efficacious in any way. It's not really the energies of God or the presence of God. It's just a sign that we do of our love and commitment to. And that's the way I was brought up. And I started to realize, especially when I went to Thomas Aquinas College, because I went there not only for the education, but to learn about the church history and get as far away from evangelical Christianity as possible. Because I started to get the kind of tools and equipment to realize it's insane. Like it's literally just a made up, subjective, man-made religion. And that I had a deep desire in my learning to see the connections related historically, and that there were rules and standards. And studying the church fathers, it became immediately apparent to me when I was at Thomas Aquinas College, although I didn't want to become Roman Catholic. I was open to it. The more I studied, the more I started to actually realize, I'm like, no, this is not actually good. A lot of the issues there. But what it did do is it gave me an appreciation for historical Christianity. And I realized all the Christians believed in the real presence. Like Christ was really present in the communion, the Eucharist.
Yeah.
And it's not till later that people just make up, oh, it's just a symbol or something like that. So what I did is, at that point, I didn't want to become Roman Catholic. I was exposed to Orthodoxy at that point, and it was kind of mysterious. I really didn't kind of understand it, and its relation to Roman Catholicism. But that's where I was introduced. About 1999, I knew about the Eastern Orthodox Church, and what I did, I wasn't, particularly interested in, thinking like, is this the church? It was just kind of, oh, it's interesting. I wonder what kind of weird group. But what I did do is I returned to my Lutheran roots. And that's because I didn't want to become Roman Catholic. I wasn't ready to become Orthodox. But I realized, well, there's at least Lutherans have some sense of authority. And at least they believe in some sacraments. They believe baptism is not just a sign, it's efficacious, it's the Christ is truly present. And the Eucharist, and I like their anti-Rome polemics too, to be honest. I was like, sweet, I'm going with these guys. So I stayed Lutheran for a while. And then it took me about 14 years of life experience in studying the Orthodox Church before I actually became Orthodox. And
wow,
it wasn't just studying too. It was a tremendous amount of suffering and pain that just absolutely humbled me, because that's what's most fundamental in Orthodoxy, is a level of humility to be able to actually see the truth of. And so, yeah, I converted 2013. Well, it's a long story. There's much more involved in that, and feel free to ask anything, but that's kind of the summation of what actually happened. And my wife and I, December 17th is our 14 years anniversary of being married. And she went to the same high school as me. So she knows, she has the same experience as me. And we were catechized and came into the Lutheran church. And we converted together and accepted the truth of Orthodoxy at the same time. So it's amazing that the experiences that we actually had that led to. So she came in and was baptized the exact same time as me into Orthodoxy.
And you mentioned Serbian father, I think, right?
Romanian?
Oh, Romanian.
Yeah, I'm in the Romanian Episcopate, OCA. And I was baptized in the Antiochian, and soon was kind of taken under the wings of my spiritual father, who is Romanian. And prior to moving to Montana, I served in a Romanian parish. We don't have any Romanian parishes here in Montana. We have OCA, Serbian, and Greek, and I serve currently between the services in the OCA and Serbian, mainly Serbian.
So do you give confession to?
No. So deacons in Orthodoxy, unlike both Roman Catholicism and certainly Protestantism, are considered part of the priesthood. And that's a threefold sacerdotal order of the priesthood. So deacon, priest, presbyter, and bishop. And they all have different things that they do, and obviously the higher authority. The priest can do nothing of himself without the authority of the bishop. And the deacon can't do anything without the authority of the bishop and the priest. So even when I go to pray or to do litanies in service, I kiss the priest's hand and get his blessing. I derive my authority from that authority going to the priest, to the bishop. So what that includes, I cannot consecrate the Eucharist. That is only the bishop and the priest. I have no power of my own to baptize, to marry, to any of the sacraments. Now I can serve with the priest. I can do the baptism with the priest, right? Because he's there. He's granting me the authority to do that with him. I'm a co-celebrant, concelebrant, via his authority and power, via the bishop. I could deliver the Eucharist. I can't consecrate it. I can deliver it. I cannot do confessions, but I can touch the chalice. I can touch the altar, touch the gospel, the utensils. I can give the Eucharist to somebody, but I don't have any of the authority to administer the sacraments in and of myself.
Great. Yeah. This is all new to me.
Yeah.
These are the things that I'm learning right now. So thank you.
Where do you find out how complicated the liturgy and beautiful? Not complicated in a bad way, but.
No, I know. It's
yeah.
deep. I love it. Well, let's get into relativism if you want to jump into that now.
Yes. So relativism, there's kind of two versions of it, either moral or kind of epistemological. Epistemology means having to do with knowledge, statements being true. But generally, it's the idea that the truth of a statement or a situation is relative to you or your society, is the standard. what that means is there's nothing independent. There's nothing true independent of the way that you see things or your group or your culture or society sees. And whereas, and it's a denial of that very statement. It's relativism or subjectivism, which is basically the standard is each person. Each person just decides what's true. There's nothing independent of them. Mm-hmm. Relativism might be like, well, it's relative to a group or culture, or society, or something like that is the standard for what's true, right, wrong, etc. It's a denial of objectivism, that there are some things that are true, irrespective of your feelings, your desires, the way that you see it, what you want, or you at all. Maybe we'd say 1 + 1 = 2, or that the sun is out, or something like that. Whatever, there's a series of things that you might actually qualify as candidates for objectivism, but relativism denies it. There are no objective truths. Mm-hmm. And that sounds particularly appealing to people today. Mm-hmm. And we just
it sounds very tolerant. So it sounds like the virtuous way to be, right?
Yeah. So it's because, well, look, and I get this all the time. It's tolerant because objectivity requires absolutism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And maybe just define absolutism is different than objectivism. That objectivism would be that there are things that are independent of your desires, your thoughts, your perspective, or you, as far as being true. Absolutism is that those truths apply equally in every place and time and stringency. And so it's kind of like a matter of degree. So one has to do with objectivity, has to do with the status of truth claims and morals. And absolutism has to do with, well, how stringent are they applied? And that just seems maybe difficult for people to, maybe some people could be like, well, I guess I could grant maybe some things are independent of us, but if you're telling me objectivity leads to absolutism, then I'd have to say in every situation, it's right or wrong or true or false. And that doesn't actually seem to be true. And so there's a flexibility. Now, that ends up being false because objectivity and absolutivity are two different concepts. So the one doesn't imply the other. Just because things are objective doesn't mean that rule or truth statement or right or wrongness will be seen to be played out in every situation exactly the same way. I mean, if you even think about like the way that judges work within courtrooms, there's the rules that are established independent of you. But how they're applied and what context and various things will differ, because that has to do with the stringency. Maybe there is, you all admit, the golden rule, the rule of charity or love, but that might play out differently in different degrees or look like different things. And so it's not absolute. Think about, like, for example, I don't know, like marriage or something like that. I don't have to give, right? The love, right, in marriage might be an objective principle, but that might look different in different cultures. Like in our culture, we're not going to give like 3 cows and 2 calves or something for, like, right, as a way to express, right, That's what absolute or stringency would mean. So that argument doesn't work, but people think that in their mind. Well, if relativism is true, then it's objectivity, and then everything would just be applied equally in the same way across the board. But there's a variety and there's a nuance in our culture, so we can't accept absolutism, and therefore we can't set objectivity, but that doesn't follow. Any questions about that? And then I'll move.
No, but I'm reminded of some of my audience might know that I'm a life coach. I'm a Christian life coach now, but I was involved in the secular coaching industry for a long time. And I was coached myself. And the final call with my last coach that I worked with, we had this discussion about absolutes and relativism. I mean, she was clearly a relativist, and we just got into this, not argument, but she thought I was upset with her for believing that there's no such thing as absolute truth. And for me, I was just like, well, I just can't work with you. I mean, I can't have a coach who thinks that everything's true and nothing's true at the same time. I mean, it doesn't.
Well, like I brought up earlier too, is it's not consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's not consistent, it's hypocritical.
Yeah.
That we all know that the people who preach tolerance the most are the most intolerant people.
Exactly.
And I say this for all of us, not any particular groups or people committed to certain ideologies. Mm-hmm. We human beings lack and often want to avoid introspection. Mm-hmm. And philosophy literally is the examined life. It's to go below the surface in appearances, the way things appear. And that's even true in our relationships. I mean, people put on their Sunday best, right? Their best appearances when they go on dates. But think about it, we're all philosophical in our relationships, right? Because we're going to go, is that really how the person is? I'd like to know what's under the appearances that they put on. And I'd like to know who I really am. And because it seems like we as human beings generally will do everything we can to avoid those kinds of things. Yeah. When it comes to ourselves, maybe we do it with other people because we're actually selfish, perhaps. I want to know because it'll be best for me. But if we train ourselves to kind of be uncritical, then we're not going to see that we're inconsistent and hypocrites. Mm-hmm. That's why it never occurs to most people that when they say there are no I'm a relativist, there are no objective truths, that they're making that an objective truth.
Yeah. Right.
Well, at least there's one that you just said, so that can't be, and they don't get it. So like, even when you bring that up. Yeah. And that's because I think about ideas is like viruses. Mm-hmm. And philosophies and systems, they're mind viruses. Mm-hmm. It's not just simply about arguments. It's that just like you could do with substances and actions, you can get yourself into a bad state of affairs that you're no longer capable all by yourself of helping yourself, right? This is exactly what they tell the addict, right? You got to admit they have a problem and that you're helpless in a sense to solve your own problem. Now, it's not like when somebody says that, they're like, oh, well, thanks, I'm all done. And here's $200 an hour for the therapy session, and I'm all better, because we've conditioned our way into thinking that way and acting that way. And therefore, we need a rehabilitation. And that's why good philosophy and the correct theology should be a rehab program to get us to start thinking about ourselves, the world, and our fellow human beings and God in the correct way. Mm-hmm. That's why when you present them a relativist, such an obvious contradiction, there are no objective truths. Is that true or false? True. Well, then you've refuted yourself. Why can't they get that? Because they're addicted to nonsense. Mm-hmm. They can't think. They've got a mind virus.
Yeah.
And so no simple, I just presented it as a simple argument. There's not going to be a simple argument that gets them out. There's a kind of training and rehab to kind of get them out of thinking incorrectly about the world. So I think that's important to bring up, because in philosophy and apologetics, the psychology is just as important as the formal kind of arguments and stuff like that. Why are they believing that? Why can't they see that? Mm-hmm. And again, commitment to other false ideas that sound good, but just because something sounds good, is it good? Yeah. Look, it seems to me that we've all heard, various moral disputes. Well, everybody has a right to their own opinion. You have your view and I have my view. Hey, maybe we're both right. That kind of. So this is the argument from equal rights man. I don't know why every time I hear this argument, I think of like Peter Tosh or something. Rasta, like equal rights. I, equal rights for all. Equal plausibility, equal rights. But again, this is an uncritical kind of way of thinking about it. Yeah, everybody has a right to have an opinion, but that doesn't mean that their opinions are true because they have a right. I think what we mean by, if we unpack it and we're critical about what does that mean, is it should mean by equal rights is that, well, I don't think people should be blackmailed or brainwashed into believing positions. They should have a right to hold a position, even if it's false. So look, that means once we unpack that we realize, well, objectivity doesn't destroy equal rights. We just mean by that is an objectivist who denies relativism would say, yeah, I don't think somebody should be brainwashed into believing something or coerced. Mm-hmm. They should be free, even if it's wrong. So I think that's something that's important to kind of unpack. Any questions about that? And I'll keep going.
No questions. This is so fascinating. I love it. Keep going.
And this is probably connected to that. Well, objectivity supports dogmatism. Just pick any blowhard or tyrant or Nazi or political fanatic, and there's all one thing they have in common. They're objectivists, right? They believe in truth with a capital T. And this actually came up recently on social media. There was another professor that had posted something in regards to religion or the Pope or something like that. And I made a comment, kind of offhanded, like, yeah, all these religions are false and they should convert to Orthodox. Baptize them all or something. I forget what. Mm-hmm. And this guy he was like so upset with, and he used the same argument and they got to use the National Socialists, right? But that's exactly what the National Socialists of the Third Reich thought too. And look what happened to. I actually pointed out.
Did they mean the fascists?
Yeah, like any. That's why I said pick your favorite. I mean, it's not literally your favorite, but for favorite example of a blowhard tyrant or political fanatic, right? Plug whoever you. This guy had picked Hitler and the Germans and the Weimar Republic.
Okay.
That these people, they believed in objective truth.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And they just killed everybody that that didn't agree with them. Now, I pointed out that I said, actually, you're wrong. You're wrong on a lot of different levels, but they weren't objectivists. They were relativists. And that if you look throughout history, any culture or society that abandons objective truth in favor of relativism no longer has any court of appeals to resolve disputes. What is relativism? I am the standard. My society is the standard of. Now, when you get conflicting groups, we can't, and we always do have conflicts as far as what positions are true or false between individuals or groups or societies, nation states, etc. What are you going to do? Well, let's go look together at a standard that's independent of us. You are the standard. So that's what relativism is. My group is the standard. So how are disputes resolved then if you can't appeal to a standard independent of you? Through force and violence. And
or
this
even
is just,
debate and have a conversation and a discussion about it. It's just shut down and it's not welcome.
Exactly. And so this is just played out in history that anytime a person or group of people abandon truth with a capital T and embrace themselves or their society as the standard for truth, then disagreements are simply worked out as the stronger wins.
Yeah.
There is no notion of truth. It really so it's simply might makes right. That's the way of the jungle.
Yeah, exactly.
And so they don't realize that, and I always, not that I quote Roman Catholics, but it does often, but it does illustrate the point. The late Pope John Paul had said he was brought up under another totalitarian regime of communism, and goes to Poland, which was under the communist yoke, and asked the people, and the crowd was 2 + 2 equals, and they said, somebody yelled out, whatever the communists say it equals. And he says, no, unless 2 + 2 = 4 and always equals 4, the Polish people will never be free. Once you abandon that, you're just handing over to the power group. You have no more appeals. And so people don't realize that no, objectivity does not support dogmatism. And so, look, in fact, it doesn't even fall, even if you granted that argument, it doesn't even fall logically. Again, dogmatism, I mean, in the negative sense, like being unreasonably closed-minded or something, or something like that. And that's a key word, right? I think all of us should be closed-minded to certain things.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Like torturing innocent people for no reason, just to get kicks or something like that. I would hope most people would be closed-minded to that. But I would say we have a reason for that. But unreasonable closed-mindedness is probably, if we unpack the word, what people find negative, the negative connotation of dogmatism. there's a good connotation of dogmatism too, but when people usually use that word, it's as a negative connotation. That's probably being unreasonably closed-minded. And so, but the fact of the matter is objectivity, right? The denial of relativism or subjectivism is not about the stringency, but about the status, right? So it doesn't tell you how you would apply that. It doesn't tell you, even just believing like I'm an objectivist, it doesn't tell you what actually is objectively true or false. It's just saying, whatever it is, it's independent of us, right? So I don't even see how it follows logically that it would make you unreasonably closed-minded. And the next thing is that I think people connect this to, well, if you're not a relativist, then you're intolerant. It's
right.
They're all kind of, it's kind of underlying is that it seems intolerant.
Yeah.
And we all want to be tolerant, right? So if we'd have to tell people they were objectively wrong, that doesn't seem to be tolerant. I mean, people,
because I'm a good person and I don't want to be a bad guy. You're the bad guy if you don't.
Hey, and everybody marches to the beat of their own drum. Who am I to say? That they're, I don't want to be judgmental. We'll have to just agree to disagree because everybody's view is just as equally valid, right? That's the tolerant outlook. My moral outlook, my views are no better than anybody else, right? And you see this, that if you were to say that something's objectively true, then I'm making myself better than, and I'm suppressing the other. I'm not being tolerant. That's kind of like the underlying probably motivator behind all this. And so it's like, I realized the other day that when I was going over this in class, I'm like, that's really interesting, the connotation of tolerance. Because it already admits, I mean, if you think about the way that you use the word in other situations, you start to realize it admits that something's bad and not good or not true, but I'm going to tolerate it.
Yeah.
I don't think people even realize it. I mean, when they're using this, I'm tolerant. You could come back and say, oh, so you are admitting that something's either morally disgusting, false, right? But not so much that you do something about it, right? I'm going to tolerate it, right? My neighbor's making a bunch of noise with the screaming kids and barking dogs and stuff like that. And I find it somewhat disturbing. Well, that's got a negative, but guess what? It's not so bad that I'm going to actually go over and say something. I'm going to tolerate it. I just thought about that this semester. I'm like, that's strange. Like, we should point that out to people that tolerate which is not what they want. They want to say that, no, it's just as equally as nothing is better. But it's like, no, the word betrays the real kind of attitude about, no, I think it's actually wrong. That's why it's literally impossible to actually say that all views are equally valid. Why? Well, because my view is that your view is false. Yeah. Right? So you can't you'd have to say, well, yeah, that's just as good as, which destroys your whole position and makes it meaningless. It's like, now you're just like psychobabble, right? Like you're talking I don't even know what you're saying at that point. Yeah, any questions about?
No, this is great. It just reminds me of, I won't go into detail, but a conversation over text that I had this week with someone who I've known for a long time. And she's concerned that my platform and some of my guests are not tolerant enough, perhaps. of her far left liberal feminist views. But is she tolerant of the guest that maybe thinks there should be some rules
Shouldn't
and
you be
regulations?
tolerant of my intolerance?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's just an equally valid position according to the philosophy of relativism. Mm-hmm. All positions are equal. So you can't, this is the way, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't actually say that and then be like, but these I won't allow.
Yeah.
I find morally disgusting, and we'll get into questions too. I mean, you could always ask, like, well, why is that true? I mean, again, part of the issue too is that if something is just subjective, I'm the standard for the notion of truth and falsity just kind of goes out the window. There's no longer any debate. You can't actually say, well, you shouldn't actually hold this view, or that view is not true. All you're doing is now just reporting psychological states. I feel, I have a notion of disgust or something like that. But that's the tragedy of relativism, is that it comes with a cost. You forfeit all debate and disagreement. Mm-hmm. Everybody's just going to be reporting their own psychological states and feelings, but there's nothing true or false or morally binding about psychological states. They're just reports. Everybody's just reporting different chemicals and reactions going on. And people don't realize that you can go that way. I mean, in the sense of you have a right to, but it comes with a heavy cost. You can no longer tell people they're wrong on any position.
Right.
You forfeit debate, you forfeit law, like ethics in general. And we're all just, everything's equally valid as just psychological states. And I don't think they think about that.
No.
Ideas have consequences and bad ideas have bad consequences. But that's part of the kind of rehabilitation program, is to realize, oh, that's not actually good. Not only is it nonsensical, it's not healthy, right, for the individual and the community. And I got to get out of that. There's a problem. Also, I think that what motivates this too is that there's cultural variation, and it doesn't seem that objectivity allows for that. They think like, well, look, if objectivism is true, if it's not relativism, then these truths would apply universally to everyone in every society, but some standards don't, right? What did I use? The example of, fulfilling your duty or something like that. Let's say we have some type of standard, fulfilling your duty of showing respect to family members of one's beloved. Okay. Now, that's not expressed and cultured exactly in the same way, because if you're in the Sudan, right, tribes, if you don't provide cattle as a dowry, it's going to be seen as offense, right? And here, that's not. And so what we could show is that, again, that's just not a thought out, it's a half-baked thought, that no, objectivism doesn't mean that there's no cultural variations, right? Because look, what would be an objective rule or standard? You should show respect to the family members of a beloved one, but that's not going to look exactly the same in every way. Mm-hmm. And also, objectivism doesn't state that every situation and every aspect of life is objective. It says some things are objective. So, for example, I imagine attire and clothing and stuff like that would be a classic example that varies across culture. That I don't know about you, but I don't know if I'd be comfortable with saying in every circumstance that if people don't dress according to my style and wear in that culture, that they're wrong.
Mhm.
Like, well, obviously they're, or particular tastes that my student, I have a student that she'll forever, we were joking in class because I'm like, you're forever now going to be my philosophical example, that she said she doesn't like tapioca pudding. We're going to be like, no, you're wrong, right? You're just false on. So there's clear cases of things that are completely dependent upon the individual and their preferences or experiences or a culture or something like that. That's not mutually exclusive to objectivism. Objectivism allows for some variation on, remember, it's relativism that is the intolerant position. It says there are no examples or situations that are independent of the individual or society. That's really the intolerant. Objectivism doesn't say this, is there are some, which is the actual logical contradiction.
Right.
So that doesn't seem to follow. Also, I'm going to, I often used to focus on just the logical contradiction and inconsistency of holding that position, or the intolerance of saying all views are equally valid or all positions. But I found that people really like this argument. What is subjectivism or relativism? That there's nothing independently true of me or my society, meaning I am the standard for truth, or my group is this, or my society is the standard. That means I'm always right. I am the standard. How could I ever be, if I am the standard of truth, or my group is, or my society, how could I ever be wrong? If that's true, it comes with and you accept that comes with a terrible cost. You can have no moral improvement as an individual or society. Why? Because improvement accepts the idea that I'm below where I should be at. I'm wrong in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that I'd like to improve. But if I'm always right, if I'm always the standard, and my society is always the standard, how could you ever improve? I think most people are completely unwilling to accept that as a consequence. There will be no improvement. Every society will be equally, they can never progress. They can never get better. And do you really want that? So again, just remind people when you're talking to a relativism, you're free to go that way. It comes with a terrible and heavy cost that I don't think you want to accept.
No, this is really tying into my journey to Christianity, because I was a relativist, New Ager for 30 years, and my truth was my truth, and I could do whatever I could do whatever I wanted. There was no talk about repentance or anything like that, or judgment from nothing about salvation, none of that stuff. So I could do whatever I wanted, believe whatever I wanted. And I didn't realize how much pride comes with that, and how much humility is required to unlearn that. It still is a process of seeing how I thought I knew everything, because, I did all these drugs and had all these truths revealed to me through these psychedelics and all the Eastern mystic yogis that I read about. And I had never read the Bible. I didn't know anything about moral objectivity. So it's,
And by the way, I totally agree with you. I gave the hippies a chance. I really did. I've been to the dead, right? I followed the dead when I was young, so I know that, and I really gave them the benefit of the doubt, and that I'm like, all right, because they preach tolerance, right? Like, hey, man, no
yeah.
judgment here, good
Mhm.
vibes. And I found personally they're some of the most intolerant people I've ever met, and some of the
Yeah.
most judgmental. So what you have there is you have a facade. And again, like I said, we all put facades on. That this is the way I want you to see me. I'm open, and this is love, right?
Right.
I'm just being loving,
Yeah.
and tolerant. Everybody's right. Nobody's wrong. It sounds and feels good, but we always have to ask ourselves, is it? First of all, is that really what you believe? Because we can put you under certain tests, litmus tests, to realize,
Yeah.
oh, well, you're now really dogmatic and intolerant, and won't accept, and you're not loving. They'll get angry and aggressive.
Oh yeah.
Where it's like, that doesn't seem like good vibes, like hippie, like doesn't seem the way of the dead, bro. Hey man, don't what's a phrase that,
Don't bring my vibe down.
no, there was a, hey man, don't put your junk on me, man. Like, don't there's like all these like kind of phrases that, but also, is it good? Like, is that, not only is that really what you believe, but is it really good for you and for all of us to actually, but most people don't go there. Like there's no introspection there whatsoever. And so we need to go, what's actually right, true, and what's the actual beautiful. That's what's loving. And I was going to say that the whole attitude, it's not just in the New Age and the hippies and stuff like that. It's pervasive through all of our contemporary society. It's I, me, mine. It's self-centered. I am the standard. It's those rules are intolerant, right? You're being judgmental. Well, what's the other option? Me and my freedom, right? Me, I'm the standard. Yeah. And people don't realize it's literally satanic. That is literally the temptation that the devil in the Garden of Eden gives to Adam and Eve.
Right.
You will become like God. Who is he to tell you can't eat? Oh, judgment, like tolerant, objectivist God? Like, shouldn't you be free to decide? Aren't you the standard? Don't you want to be God? And you can be God. And if you think about it, that's exactly, or even with moral issues, I've had people, kind of ask me, inquiring to Orthodoxy about certain moral issues, that I don't know if I could join a church that believes this. That seems intolerant. These group of people, or these groups of people positions, or something like that. Well, what's the option? So either you're the standard, or there's a standard independent of us. So that's the epistemic, right? That's the status, right? It's either objective or it's not. Then there's the issue of health. And I mean that both spiritually, bodily, and psychologically. And I always present Orthodoxy as this. It's not a dogmatic, pharisaical, rule-governed. It's a rehab program. Do you want to get better? Do you want to get healthy, spiritually, physically, and psychologically? Then we've got a program for it. And what the Orthodox Church teaches is that independent of whatever we want or our desires we want to be true, there are certain ideas and there's certain actions and behaviors that are destructive to the body, the soul, the psyche, spiritually, and both to oneself, your loved ones, in your community. And God, in his omniscient divine wisdom, without coercion, has given to us what things are true, what things are false, what things are good, healthy versus destructive. And then he opens the doors to that hospital and says, you're free to come in. You're not free to come in and say, you have to change your position. That's the dogma. That's the intolerant, right? Relativist who says that. But the other way, and you can begin to heal. You can have moral, spiritual, and physical improvement in relationships, working that rehab program. Because the standard is there's a surrendering, and as you said, Allison, a humility. I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, can you imagine an addict going to oh, you guys don't know what you're taught. You're so judgmental. Like, I'll fix myself, right? I'm right. I'm the standard. It's like, well, good luck. Like, you got yourself into this situation and you can't get yourself out. And you're miserable and unhappy, but then you don't want anybody's help, which is a picture of exactly what hell is, right? The inability to receive somebody's love and reciprocate it. I'm not taking your love. I'd rather be miserable as an addict and upset than to receive any help. Why? Because I, me, mine, I am the standard. I am God, right? And there's an anger and wrath, right? Which should be immediately evident that, well, that can't be true. The Holy Spirit is the spirit of truth and peace. Like, I can judge somebody's philosophy and a moral ideology, but just be on like, well, it's kind of interesting. You're an unhappy, angry person, right? Like, I don't want that, right? And I know that it's false. The other way, like I said, is I am the standard. There's no moral improvement. There's no intellectual improvement. There's no communal improvement because you're always right. And that's what relativism is. So now people are told that, no, don't find a way to better yourself. Find a church or a philosophy or a religion that you agree with, that meets your standard. Well, you're free to do that. But it's a life of destruction that leads to death, right? And it's certainly not loving of the other to actually take that route. I'm the standard. And we know who says that. Satan does. It's satanic. And I presented that. That's the dichotomy. Two worldviews in antithesis, but you're free. You're free to choose what you want. You can choose yourself, or you can choose, and coming back to the very beginning of our conversation, you can choose the other, a life of service, right? The Greek word is kenosis, to go outside of yourselves. One is self-centered and focused, that's satanic. The other one is an outpouring outside of oneself. One actually is, even though, and that's exactly what the devil does, right? He mixes truth with falsity.
Yeah.
That there is something true. You'll become like God, but there's something false about it. Think about the position of relativism, that, it's tolerant of all positions, but underneath it's intolerant. It's the most judgmental, dogmatic position you can take, because it's self-focused. Mm-hmm. There is nobody other than me. I am God. Right? That is taking, right, the appearance of truth, but there's a lie underneath. Takes the lie, the falsehood, and presents it as true.
Have you ever counseled a non-believer who said, I am of service and I just don't believe in Jesus Christ. I do good things all the time, and but I just don't feel like I need to be a believer and I don't need to accept Christianity? Like, what would you say?
I mean, each person differs. I might give them certain things to think about because I never want to be coercive.
Right.
I want them to look. I'm going to just give you some things to think about, some questions, and you should work through those and come to your own. I'm not going to tell you you have to believe this. I believe this, right? And I think there's good reasons, but I want you to come to that on your own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I might get them to think, well, maybe you should think about the question, what makes an action good? When you said that, I feel I'm a good person, that is it you like, what's the standard? Like, what are your reasons for? Have you ever thought about that? Because it feels good. Because, I am the standard. And then you can kind of go, there might be some problems that you want to think through that come to the cost, right? And then what I usually encourage people to, almost on kind of a therapy, is, look, for the time being, let's just ignore all the kind of theological questions of like, was this? And it really does, what do you want? Most people don't even ask that question, and they just go, they don't know what they want. And we need to kind of take inventory and be like, what is it that I want? Do you want yourself to, every desire to be satisfied no matter what? Do you desire to become better? Do you desire to kind of work through that with people? And then do you desire to become a certain type of person? And what would that look like? Why would you think that's a good? Well, think about, rather than getting up on the theological stuff, let's think about it practically. Every religion, every philosophy, every system is a program that if you work the program, it'll make you a certain way. And, there's, even among different programs, there are some people that are appealing to us that, wow, they stand out, maybe a Gandhi or a Swami or something like, and I would say usually in those systems, though, they're pretty rare. But think about, well, what is it that I like about this title? How do I respond to? Then I encourage people, have you read the lives of saints? Get to know who these people are, what type of person they are. And they're so numerous. They're not a rare occurrence. Because of their humility, they're oftentimes unnoticed. They're not political activists. They're not in the spotlight. And so it takes some investigation to find out, my God, if you looked at the Synaxarion and the amount of saints each day, you'd be blown away, and you start to read these people's lives. And here you're moving away from the mind, like all the rules, the theology, and into the heart. We relate to one another and God, not by our intellect and discursive reasoning, but through our nous, the heart of hearts. That's where you have a personal encounter, and you can have a personal encounter with the saints. And then I just ask a simple question. Do you like it? Do you like these people? Would you ever want to become like them? Then we have a program for that. If you don't, you're free. Go find the program that will make you be the way that you want. That's it. But investigate it. Know what you want to become, and then know what program produces a particular type of person when that program's work. and then go find it. I don't know what else to tell somebody, but there's a freedom in that. I find that that's most successful. So it's difficult being clergy because you have to constantly switch modes from like, oh, I got to talk to a person as a therapist and a counselor, right? Versus debating, or right. I mean, I've had people, I've written, arguments and been very forceful about, and people will say that, get offended that, well, you're criticizing my belief and blah, blah, blah. And you know what? That'll never lead to somebody converting. Now, first of all, people always fail to recognize this. Usually when I'm debate, my intention is not to convert the person I'm debating with. That rarely, my audience, my object of intention is the audience. I'm to show, first of all, when I'm doing apologetics, I'm not doing conversions.
Right.
I'm defending my faith.
You're defending your faith, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, great if that happens to actually convert somebody, but that's not my primary object of intention. I'm defending my position by tearing down your strongholds is foolishness. It's retarded, right? They don't hold any, they're inconsistent, they're dangerous, right? And then I defend myself. But usually when you're attacking your opponent, they're not going to be receptive to that. So I've never thought that going into a debate or argument that like, oh, I'm really trying to convert you. Right. And the second thing is nobody's going to convert because this person was saying, I have this Orthodox priest that comes over and they don't do your arguments and, tear down Roman Catholicism. I mean, they're nice and they do. And I'm like, well, being nice and you liking the priest and thinking Orthodoxy is cool is never going to get you to convert unless you see that I have a fundamental problem in my belief system and paradigm. All you're going to do is see, like the relativist, well, that's cool. That person's really like, I like stuff about that, right? You'll never go, but I'm abandoning ship and going over to them unless there's a problem with your ship. And you're never going to find out that there's a problem with your ship unless somebody presents an argument that the positions that you hold are folly, right? And wrong. Yeah. But I told the person, I'm like, that's just one particular mode that I take on. I don't go over like when I'm visiting the sick or, family members, right? Trying to comfort, be like, hold on, you're all wrong. I'm gonna give you an argument for why you need to convert, right? I know how to adapt out of the mode of doing philosophy and apologist and be with somebody. Maybe not even say anything, just I'm gonna hear what you have to say. So I found I'm offended. I find it offensive that you would think that I only have one mode of operating. Well, he just sits around and argues and tells everybody they're wrong. I'm like, when I'm in a debate, yeah, like, or writing a paper, but like, typically not outside of that. Like, I know how to talk and relate and listen to people. So I thought that was kind of funny. You got to switch your kind of mode sometimes. You need to be gentle. Sometimes you need to be harsh. That's another criticism too. That's not nice. That's not Orthodox.
Yeah, that's not Christ-like. Jesus wouldn't talk like that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, nice is not a virtue, either in antiquity or in the Bible. Right. Love is, but love's tough sometimes. It's not always a happy feeling. And so, there's a time and place on and season for everything. You have to be nuanced. Jesus isn't a hippie Jesus, pacifist. Not all our saints are like that, or Saint Seraphims, the Seraphs, some of them are warrior saints.
Yeah.
A priest sometimes isn't always, fluffy feelings. Sometimes can you imagine if like we said that to our parents growing
Right.
up?
Yeah, I
You
was
can't tell
thinking
me
that.
I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Like, you can't ever yell at me. That's not nice and Christ-like. No, sometimes parents have to spank us, and sometimes they have to tell us harsh things, right, that are going to make us cry, because they love us, not because they enjoy watching us suffer. Right? So that's important, I think, as well, to think through that. And I think you'll find, just generally, I'm just amazed the general just lack of nuance that people have. Literally black and white thinking. You always have to be like this and never like, it's like, now there's something about the world that's really interesting. What did I always say? They invert, right? This is why we know it's satanic, right? And false.
Yes.
Is that they'll say you shouldn't be so black and white. You should be more nuanced. And I realized, holy smokes, some things you really should be black and white on. But the things that you should be black and white on, and we could think of several examples, they're like, oh, it's not so clear cut, right? Murder of the innocent. I mean, it's not so, does it really come down to pro-life? Or it's like, well, yeah, some things really do come down to an either or. Should I torture this innocent person for no, like, oh, come on, man, don't be so black and white in your thinking, right? I mean, we got to be more nuanced. And I'm like, yet the things that they should be nuanced on, they're black and white on, and vice versa. The black and white things that really are black and white, they're always saying there's nuance. It's inverted, it's perverted, it's false, and it's destructive. And I thought about that the other day. I'm like, that's really interesting.
I was on Tristan's channel, Primal Edge Health, and we had a discussion, and there was one comment that was, she was just sharing her perspective that I had when I was a New Ager. I looked at her channel, and she teaches chakra balancing stuff. And so her comment was long, but she said that Allison's views are very extreme. And on this discussion, I was sharing how my life has changed, accepting Christ and becoming Christian versus how my life was when I was in the New Age. So I was really sharing my own journey, my personal story. And her comment was that I was extreme, and that my views were black and white, and that we shouldn't be creating more division. So her concern was that by me sharing about how my life has improved leaps and bounds in only a year and a half of being a Christian, that I'm creating division. And she included something about the yin and the yang, like life is about balancing the masculine and feminine. And I don't see my channel or my story as creating division at all, but what we're talking about just reminded me.
Yeah, it might be helpful with people to ask first. Let's just help them in kind of a therapy sense of, and good philosophy really is therapia, that let's just roll back and what do we mean by this term? What do you think that word extreme means? And maybe they've never thought about that. Maybe ask them, are there no positions that you think you should be extreme, in the sense that you, do you feel that what you're saying could be perceived as, notice how the therapist is always could, right? How would you feel? Could you see that it could feel that the person's feeling attacked? You know how they're always, it's like non-committal, right?
Yeah.
You can do that with that could you maybe see how the other side might perceive that is divisive and judgmental? Have you ever thought maybe how they would feel with the, and then later you can go down the road of like, well, is it? I mean, am I correct to think about, and you often find this, right? Like again, it's the hypocriticalness of, it's always the divisive that are saying the other is divisive. It's always the one committing the crime that's accusing the other of, though you are the one that, and again, this is the way of Orthodoxy. Let's go inside. Maybe I'm wrong about, maybe this doesn't make sense and it's inconsistent. Or you just like, are you always right, Elizabeth? Then why are we having a conversation? There's no relationship if that literally is the sense of being dogmatic and unreasonable closed-mindedness. And again, we just help people with, why are those things true that I believe? Do you care about that? Do you care about just being right or thinking you're right? Or are you interested in finding out, are there reasons to think that that might be right or false or wrong? Would you like to go with a journey where we explore those things, that there's reasons? That's an openness.
I love that. I love that so much. You're helping me. I mean, I'm learning so much from you right now, because my immediate response to my friend the other day, I was just so like, how could she think that I'm creating a platform for hate with my channel? And I just got I got defensive.
Oh yeah.
And so, yeah, it might have, maybe
here's what I do too. And as Orthodox, we're all going to be working on this. Let's get out of our passions and our old habits. And one of the things that I try to train myself to do, if I'm upset or defensive, I won't respond to somebody. Just because it's good for the other person and the state of my own soul, but I actually won't say correct things. I'll be unreasonable. My flight's up, right? And my analytic mode's down. And so I don't have to, that's the other thing I tell myself. I don't have to, no matter how much it feels like that, because I'm always like, I hate leaving stuff unsettled. And it's like, the thing in my mind's like, we got to deal with it right now. You got to call the person up right now. You can't let this, I mean, how do you know what they're thinking, right? Those are all the like demonic thoughts that, how do you, what if, they're literally unrealities, right? That what ifs are not actually saying what is. What if they take it this way? What if you don't say that? And how do you know that? And it's just like, and then you're all emotional. You got yourselves all emotionals, and then you end up doing something rash without thinking it through. And then you end up regretting. It's like, oh man, I messed that relationship and that opportunity up. So I've learned from a lot of mistakes that I've done. And so what I'll do is tell myself, I don't need to respond no matter how bad. And it's like anxiety. Like you feel like you're having a panic attack if you don't. And part of that is from the demons know how to work on me, because I'm one of those persons that I got to know. You ask my wife, it's the craziest. If there's a missing sock, it doesn't matter what our priorities, like we're going to miss it, like we're got a flight. I'm like, nobody move. There's a missing sock and I don't know where it is, right? Something's not right. And she's like, it doesn't matter. It's a sock. We'll buy more. And I'm like, yeah, but where is it? Right. Like, and she's like, so that's more important than the flight. And I'm like, I know, we got to catch the flight or we got to meet these people. But like this thing pops up in my mind. Yeah. What about, where is it? Don't you find it weird? They kind of like, did somebody come in and take your socks and do this? And it becomes really emotional anxiety. And it's like, it makes it so that I can't actually function in life. I'm like, oh, he's missed his job, his interview, and the flight. And why? Because he couldn't find and know where his sock was, his missing sock. I mean, how absurd is and ridiculous is that? And it's the demons know that I'm like that. And so they'll do the same thing with people too. Well, you don't know. You don't know unless you write them right now, and you got to confront this, right? And so I have to recognize that that's going on. And then two, I have to train myself. You're emotional and you're in your passions. Step back, give it some time. The world's not going to end. Nobody's going to change. The person's not going to change their position. You're not going to die and then I get out of my emotions and my passions, and then I can revisit and know what to say to that person. And I always thankful that I'm so glad that I didn't initially write or say something to a person there in the now, because I would have been wrong. I would have messed it all up.
You know what though? In my marriage, so my husband is more on the side of waiting to think about, really like think about the situation before he just blurts out. And whereas I take that as he's ignoring me or not making it an important enough issue. Like, oh, I see, you've got better things to do, or oh, you're just ignoring me. But no, really, he doesn't want to, like you're saying, he doesn't want to just be in that emotional space where he's going to say something that later he wouldn't have said if he would have just.
And in a marriage, we just got to remind ourselves that because in relationships, there's all these assumptions. Well, obviously they just know I'm like this. I don't know why they don't. We got to go outside and go, I wonder how my spouse is perceiving this. Yeah. Maybe I shouldn't just make assumptions that my wife knows what I'm thinking, or this is how and remind that, hey, this isn't to not say that I'm not hearing you. So we got to speak these things out audibly. And that one's really good. I hear what you're saying. This is not to nobody likes to be shut down and feel like they're not being heard. And that's often a big thing in relationships. And so it's good to remind vocally that it is a form of communication, that it's not to shut you down, or I don't want to hurt you. I want to take some time to think. Yeah. This is how I am, and then flip it back. Is that okay with you? Because we also don't want to feel like our autonomy and our decisions are being taken away from. So these principles are much more difficult to work out in marriages than just people online or friendships, I think. And they may look the way they work out different too. But like we said, in principle, it's the same thing, same kind of rule that we're.
I love how this conversation went into like a marriage counseling session almost.
Well, I don't want people to think that, like, again, that philosophy or whatever I do, and by the way, that's just as valuable is any other career and things that we're doing in life. God puts us where he wants us. I don't know why he put me where he did, in the den of the lions in academia, right? So nobody should feel like, oh, I want to actually be there and be envious. No, you don't want to. It is the den of Satan. These were all the bad ideas come out. And I always joke with that there's all kinds of, talk about nuance, different types of stupid. And a lot of the types of stupid, you got to go to the university and school to learn about and believe. And that's where I'm at. I'm in the middle of, so we're all called, right, to be in certain places and use our talents. They're no better than any other, right? And so in this sense, we're actually very tolerant, right? That I'm here in philosophy, and so I can speak in the area that I work in. And I just wanted to make sure that people, it's not all head, right? It's not all just simple art. It's very easy to perceive that philosophy would be like that. And maybe it's because many philosophers are like that, but it's not the ideal. It doesn't have to be that way. That there's a certain kind of therapy and relation, like all that stuff's important.
I feel like I could talk to you for another 2 hours, but
I know. We went a good, we're thinking, hour and a half. Yeah, forgive me, I talk too much, everybody.
No, it's such an honor to have this time with you. And I'm so glad you didn't have to rush off and teach a class or something like that. So thank you.
No, there's a light festival later, I think my wife and I are going to go to, that on our main street, which will be cool. So I actually still have time to go do that.
Why don't you tell us about Patristic Faith and what you're going to be doing with that?
Yeah, so Patristic Faith is an idea that I came up with on a vision quest when I was traveling with the Grateful Dead.
I knew you were going to say something like that. You know what? And before I forget,
a psychedelic experience. I had this vision.
I wonder if we were at the same Dead shows, because I went to Dead shows on the West Coast. Did you go to like Shoreline and?
No, I didn't go to Shoreline.
Oakland Coliseum.
And I only was I was going to go to more, and we are going to go to Vegas, like on that tour. It was like 95 or something, like 94, 95. Mm-hmm. And I told my friend, I'm like, hey, why don't we, because we're in high school, I'm like, let's just wait for, he's going to come back around next year. And then he died.
And Jerry died.
I was like, whoops. The funny thing about regret, kids, is that it's better to regret the things that you have done than you haven't done. So back I actually got the idea of patristic faith about a year ago. And I was thinking about, a lot of it is just working with all the different guys, like Patrick from Church of Eternal Logos, and Jay really was the first person that I actually started working with. And then, Tristan and Lewis and David and Michael Cisco, Michael Witkoff, and all these different people. And we're loosely all kind of connected together. And some of these have really good big followings. And we're all had the same kind of vision, same ethos, right? Same views about orthodoxy, about very traditional, that we wanted to preserve that tradition. We didn't want orthodoxy watered down. We didn't want other influences from Protestantism and the culture coming in and changing that. And I think one of the traits that we all had was that there was no fear to speak the truth, even if people would be offended. Mm-hmm. And so it was a tough orthodoxy. It was a true orthodoxy. It wasn't, we're not going to water it down and be like, well, how can we appeal to as many people as possible? Well, that might be,
we don't want to be intolerant.
We don't want to be intolerant. Yeah. None of us like that. We wanted nothing to do with that. And we noticed, especially the demographics, the particular age groups, the Zoomer generation in particular, they wanted nothing that the world was giving them. They wanted nothing that's marketed Orthodox Christianity or, buffet style Christianity. That they wanted a hard Orthodox. It was going to be difficult. Sometimes it's going to offend. We don't want it watered down. And I think our message started to appeal to that group, not just them, right? But like they're a large group. And through various things, both in the culture and the stuff with the Koof science and stuff like that, things that weren't immediately present, beliefs and different things like that, and just lifestyles and ethos, through all of it became more apparent that there's people in the church that are holding on, that may say they're Orthodox. They might do, and I'm not judging that they're not Orthodox. I'm just saying that I hope all of us going to church, we're Orthodox, we're doing the prayers and stuff like that. Very little of us know, like, who are these people? What are they really like? Certainly, laity don't have any access to that. You put your Sunday best on. I don't know what this person does. What are their core values and beliefs? And through all of this crisis and just, unfortunately, more politicization and various kind of secular ideologies that have come in and influenced people, it became readily apparent that there are two fundamental types of people. And this is not political. It's not left versus right or something like that at all. I'm not talking. They're more fundamental values than political values that people hold to that are actually incompatible. None of us realized that because we didn't have kind of a crisis that the things that were under the skin didn't rise up.
Yeah.
And I kind of appreciate everything that we were going through. And again, what was shown is some people, again, have, just because they're in church doesn't mean they hold the same values as traditional Orthodoxy. It became apparent to all of us that they're holding secular ideas that are incompatible and destructive and contrary to Orthodoxy, and now we're just seeing it. And that we don't want that. And these are the people that took offense to, and whatever names they want to call you, you're unloving, you're mean, you're divisive, you're political. By the way, that term is never referring to, almost never, that you're actually supporting a party or political candidate. It means, I don't like what you have to say, so you're political, right? It's like, and that they didn't like the traditional things, right? They didn't like, they conceived of it in a different way that I didn't think was, a lot of us thought was compatible with Orthodoxy. And then there was another group of people, especially among the young, that I don't want any of that. I want true Orthodoxy, and I don't mean in the schismatic sense, forgive me. A hard Orthodoxy, not a watered down, marketed, not Orthodoxy palpable to everybody, because it sounds good and it's nice. And, and that's why I ran with this idea that, hey, maybe patristic faith isn't for everybody. I'm not trying to market to everybody. You're free. Again, I'm always like, you're free to go and get whatever you want. But what connected all of us together, and I have this quote on the site by St. John Chrysostom: we must not mind insulting men if by respecting them we offend God. And there was a real kind of warriorness among both the demographics, the larger demographics of the youth, the Z generation, and everybody that we were loosely working with, that priority number one, we're going to find the truth in traditional Orthodoxy, preserve the faith of the fathers, the faith that established the universe, and we will never attempt to offend God, even if that means offending, and you don't like it, too bad. Like, I think you see that in all of us. And it was really easy to get all the name calling from what I call normie docs, right? The normal run-of-the-mill, right? Which I'm finding that their fundamental values are not the traditional values of, they're secular values, political values, things that end up not being compatible with orthodoxy. Well, guess what? It was here that we got the name calling. You're divisive, you're political, you're a conspiracy theorist. Yeah. And it was really because they're the norm, they're the majority. As at least in the appearance and in the parishes, it was easy to brush those people off. You're a fringe fanatic conspiracy theorist. Plug in your favorite insult, okay? You get what I'm saying. Yeah. And I started to realize we're tactically dumb. We're all operating with our own independent little channels, and these people don't realize we're strong. We're strong in our numbers, and we're actually unified. Let's show them. And in doing so, also those who desire a rich, true orthodoxy, unchanged, uncompromised, and extreme orthodoxy can be taught. And so I got the idea, we need to consolidate. You know what? It's easy to brush Deacon Ananias off, or Michael Whitcoff, or somebody is, oh, this is a nobody. But we're all working together. Let it be known. And so I came up with the idea of, let's consolidate. Let's have a web page where all the traditional orthodoxy, the uncompromising, not the watered down orthodoxy light, but the hard, the faith of the fathers, i.e. patristic faith. Let's have a platform in which we host that directs all of these. People are already watching one or two of these people, but may not know about. What if we pulled it all together? Yeah. And we had the Orthodox faithful be able to resource whatever they want? We would be a force of good to be reckoned with. You couldn't brush it off. You're just a conspiracy theorist. You're just a divisive. No, we're not. And that's kind of a psychological tactic too, that some people are really good at. You make the other feel you're the freak. Yeah. Right. You're the outside. I mean, think about like what high school is like. Well, no, I'm not. You're the outlier, right? You're outlier, like theologically, morally, and people succumb more to the psychological tactics. And I'm not saying do brainwashing or anything like that, but like we went through in the stream, psychological tactics and rhetoric and these different things are important in debate and theology and apologetics. And we oftentimes focus too much on the arguments. It's like, you got to get the psychology of. And the other side is very good at the psychology of manipulation. And what's one of my favorite terms by Noam Chomsky, manufactured consent. And I'm just like, look, learn from them. Like they, the difference is we have the faith of the fathers on our side, the truth. So that's what I've done. And I've been taking a little bit longer with this because I'm just trying to cross all, dot all my I's and cross all my T's, get the permissions and the blessings, put together a clergy advisory board, right? So we're not just rogues doing our own thing and stuff like that. It's under clerical and spiritual advice as far as professionalism and doctrine and practicality and stuff like that. So you can find it's up. I put a few samples of just some videos on ethics that I had actually done just to get something up. People can find it. There's an about section kind of talking about what the site's actually supposed to do. But we have several clergy that are going to be content providers, some very famous ones that you all love, and the rest of the gang, that you're all aware of. Blogs. We have David just wrote an excellent piece on Saint Cyril and he specialized in the monophysite. He wrote an article on Severus of Antioch. He'll be the first one. That'll be the first blog article that's up. So we're just kind of in the process of just polishing it up, get everybody's profile pictures up, and then bam, we're gone. It'll take off, hopefully, with the grace of God and your prayers and support.
Yes, super exciting. I will share on my Instagram and
Thank you.
Talk about it here on the channel. And yeah, it's awesome. It's amazing.
Yeah. So thank you, Allison.
I want to thank you so much for spending all this time with me and my audience. Any final thoughts or any last words?
Let's not forget that keep everything in your prayers. Pray for your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. That'll soften your heart. And we don't wish the worst, the destruction of our enemies. Why? Because we're Christians. We're known for love. There's nothing greater than when the persecutors repent and find Christ and are baptized, when the revilers, the haters, we can get so caught up in our passion that I wish that God destroy this man or woman or whoever. Your favorite enemy, plug in your favorite enemy. No, wouldn't you rather see them turn from their destructive ways and hate and repent? Nothing greater than that. You're not going to hate them or have ill feelings towards them. And so we need to pray for the entire world. We need to pray particularly for our enemies for their salvation. And I just want to leave you with that too, that it's not a life of the mind. The mind doesn't know what it's doing without the heart. And let us bring our minds into our hearts in prayer and offerings to God for his guidance and for our own healing and for the healing of the entire world.
Wow, thank you so much. What a blessing for my channel and for everybody watching. And just thank you so much. And I want to thank my audience too for watching, supporting. Thank you for liking this video if you enjoyed it, sharing it with somebody in your life. And again, if you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm at A Devotional Heart. It's a.devotional.heart. And if you want to support my mission with this channel, I don't receive any ad revenue. So if you'd like to make a donation, the link is in the description, along with all of and there were even books I was going to mention today, but I'll put links to them in the description relating to the topic today. And thank you guys so much for watching. Another way you can support me is keep me in mind for mentorship, coaching for a woman in your life who might be looking for somebody right now to support them with femininity, relationships, wellness, and small business as well. I can help them strategize with their entrepreneurial projects. So with that, I will wish everybody a beautiful day. God bless you all, and I'll see you next time.